For my credit inquiry project, I decided to divide the project into 3 different experiments. Weeks 1 through 3 was experiment 1. Week 4, 5, and 6, experiment 2. Week 7 and 8 will be experiment 3. So for weeks 1 through 3, my experiment was, what do mealworms prefer to eat? Would they like potatoes or would they like a watermelon? My procedure was, for the 3 different weeks, it slightly varied. So for the first week, what I decided to do was put the food close to where the mealworms were to see which they preferred. When observing them, at first they seemed to like and gravitate towards the watermelon, as you can see. As the week continued, they gathered towards the potato. You can see them underneath it, you can see it to the side of it, and you can see some of the mealworms on top of the habitat of the potato. For week 2, I decided I was going to remove the watermelon and potato and put them on opposite sides of the habitat to see which ones they would prefer. So looking through this, the results was that they still gravitated towards the potato, and they would always be next to it, on top of it, or next near it. So as you can see in this picture, they were all next to the potato, even though they were separated. And in this picture, after a couple more days, they were still next to the potato rather than the watermelon. You can even see shedding and some pupas starting to form. And I even noticed I was able to get some beetles coming out. So for week 3 was the last week of this experiment of which they preferred. So this time I decided to take both the watermelon and potato and put them on opposite side of where most of the mealworms were to see which they preferred. As you can see, when they were moving, they started heading towards the potato. This is where the potato used to be, and this is where the mealworm stayed for a long time. As the week continued, you can even see that they're getting closer to the potato and leaving the watermelon behind. So the result was that the potato won over the watermelon. For weeks 4 through 6, my question was, do the mealworms prefer darkness or light? I believe that they were more active in a dark environment than being in a lit environment. So what I decided to do was, in the morning, they will be in a lit environment where everything was well lit. And in the evenings, I will move them to my room where it was going to be completely dark and there was going to have no sunlight or no light at all. At the time, I believed that they were dead because when I gave them to my 1-year-old nephew to see because he was excited, he accidentally shook the habitat and I assumed that they died of shock. But what happened was they just weren't as active. In this video, you can see even this little mealworm moving very slightly after being in a lit environment all day. And when they were in a darker environment, after a couple days, when I had more mealworms and more pupas, they were a lot more active. So the results for this was that they preferred a dark environment rather than a lit environment. For the last week's experiments, my question was, do they prefer sawdust or oatmeal? And I believe that they will prefer oatmeal rather than sawdust. So what I did was I took out all my mealworms, my pupas, and my beetles and put them aside while I created a habitat of half oatmeal, half sawdust. One is going to be a rough and one is going to be a softer environment. While observing, I noticed that they mostly always stayed in the oatmeal environment, while a couple did go towards the sawdust environment, but it seemed that they always preferred to be in the rougher patch area. So as you can see here, there's a lot more in the oatmeal rather than in the sawdust environment. Last week of the experiment, I continued to see which ones they preferred, and the winner was clearly oatmeal, as whenever a beetle was in the sawdust environment, they were slipping and sliding and didn't like that environment at all.